Right, so yesterday we read up to page 8, I believe, of the book called The Hatchet. Hatchet 这本书，简单介绍一下，如果你们不知道的话，就是我学生时代的时候念的，然后我觉得还蛮不错的，它有点深奥，然后可以有点自我认识的感觉。那如果你睡不着，或者是想要听无聊的话，那你可以考虑听听看这的朗读。那 OK，as you can see, it's nearly 12 midnight. And I'm still practicing. 朗读部分呢，或者是学习部分就是这样子，每天做一点，每天做一点，千万不要觉得说今天没有做，那明天 double. It doesn't work like that. Or it can work like that, but ideally, try to take some time off each day and just practice something. Okay, it doesn't have to be English, but for the purpose of this exercise, it happens to be English. 反正就是你花时间在什么身上呢，你就会进步什么。So let's begin. 先放大一下。Alright, try it on. See how it works on your belt. And he would normally have said no. That it looked too hokey to have a hatchet on your belt. Those were the normal things he would say, but her voice was thin, had a sound like something thin that would break if you touched it, and he felt bad for not speaking to her. Knowing what he knew, even with the anger, the hot white hate of his anger at her, he still felt bad for not speaking to her, and so to humor her, she loosened his belt and pulled the right side out and put the hatchet on and rethreaded the belt. Scooch around so I can see. He moved around in the seat, feeling only slightly ridiculous. She nodded, just like a scout, my little scout. And there was the tenderness in her voice that she had when she was small, the tenderness that she had when he was small and sick with a cold, and she put her hand on her forehead, and the burning came into his eyes again, and he had turned away from her and looked out the window, forgotten the hatchet on his belt, and so arrived at the plane with the hatchet still on his belt. 哇，差点喘不了气。其实像这种作文或者是小说，你看它非常的长，然后断句很特别。那这个呢，就是可以帮助你，如果你是学生或者是你是老师还是 whatever，可以帮助你在文字上的表达啊，尤其是写作上，要怎么样写好的文章，就是看好的作文。OK。Because it was a bush flight from a small airport, there had been no security, and the plane had been waiting, with the engine running when he arrived, and he had grabbed his suitcase and pack bag and run for the plane without stopping to remove the hatchet. So it was still on his belt. At first he had been embarrassed, but the pilot had said nothing about it, and Brian forgot it as they took off and began flying. More smell now, bad. Brian turned again to glance at the pilot, who had both hands on his stomach and was grimacing in pain, reaching for the left shoulder again as Brian watched. Don't know, kid. The pilot's words were a hiss, barely audible. Bad eggs here, bad eggs. Though it was something I ate, but OK。如果你现在完全不知道发生什么情况，其实基本上也就是小男孩家庭就是有一点就是脆弱，那他就是正在一个私人小飞机上呢，应该去找他父亲，那他父亲刚好是住比较乡下的地方，然后呢，飞机上只有他跟这个驾驶者，然后这个驾驶的机师呢，就是身体有点不舒服。He stopped as a fresh spasm of pain hit him. Even Brian could see how bad it was. The pain drove the pilot back into the seat, back and down. I never had anything like this. The pilot reached for the switch on his mic cord, his hand coming up in a small arc from his stomach, and he flipped the switch and said, "This is flight 46." And now a jolt took him like a hammer blow, so forcefully that he seemed to crush back into the seat, and Brian reached for him. Could not understand at first what it was, could not know, and then knew. Brian knew. The pilot's mouth went rigid. He swore and jerked a series of slams into the seat, holding his shoulder now, swore and hissed. Chest, oh God, my chest is coming apart. Brian knew now. The pilot was having a heart attack. Brian had been in the shopping mall with his mother when a man in front of Paisley's store had suffered a heart attack. He had gone down and screamed about his chest. An old man, much older than the pilot. Brian knew. The pilot was having a heart attack, and even as the knowledge came to Brian, he saw the pilot slam into the seat one more time. One more awful time, he slammed back into the seat, and his right leg jerked, pulling the plane to the side in a sudden twist, and his head fell forward and spit came. Spit came from the corners of his mouth, and his legs contracted up into the seat, and his eyes rolled back in his head until there was only white for his eyes, and the smell became worse. Filled the cockpit, and all of it so fast, so incredibly fast that Brian's mind could not take it in at first, could only see it in stages. The pilot had been talking just a moment ago, complaining of the pain. He had been talking. Then the jolts came. 那不知道你们目前有没有发现，这个作者他的叙述呢，总是很喜欢用短句来算是衬托出一个关键的想法或者是情况。他会讲一大段，然后就重点这样子。The jolts that took the pilot back had come, and now Brian sat, and there was a strange feeling of silence in the thrumming roar of the engine. A strange feeling of silence and being alone. Brian was stopped. He was stopped. Inside, he was stopped. He could not think past what he saw or what he felt. All was stopped. The very core of him, the very center of Brian Robson, was stopped and stricken with a white flash of horror, a terror so intense that his breathing, his thinking, and nearly his heart had stopped. Seconds passed, seconds that became all of his life, and he began to know what he was seeing, began to understand what he saw, and that was worse, so much worse that he wanted to make his mind freeze again. He was sitting in a bush plane roaring 7,000 feet above the northern wilderness with a pilot who had suffered a massive heart attack and who was either dead or in something close to a coma. He was alone. In the roaring plane with no pilot, he was alone. Alone. 哇，居然念完 Chapter 1。继续，还有3分钟。For a time he could not understand. Brian could do nothing. Even after his mind began working and he could see what had happened, he could do nothing. It was as if his hands and arms were lead. 这边讲的不是念力，这边讲 lead， 因为这是铅的意思，就是化学的元素的铅 Pb. Then he looked for ways for it not to have happened. Be asleep. His mind screamed at the pilot. Just be asleep and your eyes will open now and your hands will take the controls and your feet will move to the pedals. But it did not happen. The pilot did not move except that his head rolled on a neck, impossibly loose, as the plane hit a small bit of turbulence. Somehow the plane was still flying. Seconds had passed, nearly a minute, and the plane flew on as if nothing had happened, and he had to do something, but did not know what. Help. He had to help. He stretched one hand toward the pilot, saw that his fingers were trembling, and touched the pilot on the chest. He did not know what to do. He knew there were procedures that you could do mouth-to-mouth on victims of heart attacks and push their chest CPR, but he did not know how to do it, and in any case, he could not do it with the pilot, who was sitting up in the seat and still strapped in with his seatbelt. So he touched the pilot with the tips of fingers, touched him on the chest, and could feel nothing, no heartbeat, no rise or fall of breathing, which meant that the pilot was almost certainly dead. Please, Brian said, but did not know what or who to ask. Please. The plane lurched again, hit more turbulence, and Brian felt the nose drop. It did not dive, but the nose went down slightly, and the down angle increased the speed, and he knew that at this slight angle down, he could ultimately fly into the trees. He could see them ahead on the horizon, where before he could see only sky. He had to fly it somehow, had to fly the plane, he had to help himself. The pilot was gone beyond anything he could do. He had to try and fly the plane. He turned back in the seat, facing the front, and put his hands still trembling on the control wheel, his feet gently on the rudder pedals. You pulled back on the stick to raise the plane. He knew that from reading. You always pulled back on the wheel. He gave it a tug, and it slid back toward him easily, too easily. The plane, with the increased speed from the tilt down, swooped eagerly up and drove Brian's stomach down. He pushed the wheel back in, went too far this time, and the plane's nose went below the horizon, and the engine's speed increased with a shallow dive. Too much. He pulled back again, more gently this time, and the nose floated up again, too far but not as violently as before, then down a bit too much, and up again, very easily. And the front of the engine cowling settled. When he had it aimed at the horizon and it seemed to be steady, he held the wheel where it was, let out his breath, which he had been holding all this time, and tried to think what to do next. It was a clear blue sky day with fluffy bits of clouds here and there, and he looked out the window for a moment, hoping to see something, a town or village, but there was nothing. All right, 先注明一下，在这里。Okay, so see 10分钟可以念很多东西。当然，因为我英文有学，就是有一点基础，所以念的比较多。Imagine how much you can achieve in such a short time. Okay, so good luck.